welcome to the Vantage Point Podcast. Zach, thanks so much for joining me today. Yeah, first of all, how are you?
It's an absolute pleasure to be here. I've heard a lot about your podcasts and yeah, I'm looking forward to it. And I'm great. I'm great today. I'm on an admin day. So I'm just writing up stuff for patients and doing all the stuff that you need to do when you're self-employed.
Let's take you back to when you first started to get into the world of sports massage, osteopathy. What was it that first got you started into all this?
I used to live in London in the late 80s. There was all kinds of stuff going on. That was when you used to have mobile phones, right? But they weren't this big. They were more like this. I had very few qualifications. A friend of mine found me a bicycle and I slowly became a cycle messenger. Yeah. And I used to deliver packages around London. And I did that and I managed to get myself out of being homeless and deliver packages for like 6 years. And I ended up living with a load of doctors in Hackney. And that's what sparked my first interest in medicine, if you like, yeah, in the human body. And I used to help the doctors practice for their medical exams, and they used to use me as a body. And I learned so much about medicine and the human body from them. And then I met my ex-wife there, and she became a doctor in Ysbyty Gwynedd. Yeah, and that's why I kind of moved up here. But I moved up here initially to do sports science at Bangor University. I did that, did a postgrad there. I studied human body composition. I used to weigh people underwater, use calipers on them. DEXA, used to scan them on DEXA to look at their lean body mass, all that kind of stuff. I did a little bit of teaching at the university and a little bit of teaching at Coleg Menai for a few years. And then I got into sports massage from actually injuring myself down at Treborth track. I was a sprinter. Yeah, this was like, now I'm about 18 stone. Little bit too overweight. I think I was about 12 stone then. And I injured my hamstring, I tore it. And my wife at the time was a doctor, a GP, couldn't do anything about it. So I went to see a sports masseur. And the sports masseur really helped me. A guy called, I think it was called Neil Marsh, really, really helped me. And I thought, this is good. And it's better than teaching. I went and did a course in London School of Sports Massage with a guy called Mel Cash. Ended up doing that, opening a clinic in North Wales. And the idea was to work with my ex-wife as a doctor and have a sports clinic. Didn't quite work out. She didn't like my nose or something, I don't know. And got into working with cycling teams, did a bit with Great Britain, then got into osteopathy from there. And from then on, I've done osteopathy, did an osteopathic degree, which was part-time, 5 years. So I used to work in my clinic up here and then go to London for 5 years, back and forth. Very hard, part-time study, much better to do it full-time. And then I worked in the UK, I worked in North Wales for a bit. And then I moved to the south of France, worked in a place called Antibes in Monaco. And I came back and then I flipped again to Singapore, worked out there for a while. Did a little bit of time in India, again, working with a surf camp in a place called Karnataka. So yoga, surf, and a bit of osteopathy. And then I came back and I've been here ever since. But I've done a lot of other stuff. I've been away to, like last year, went to the Himalayas to teach Sherpas sports massage. It's a great skill to have. Everybody, without a shadow of doubt, can do sports massage. And everybody, or any kind of massage, everybody can get hands-on and help their partners, their family. In India, the whole family does massage. It's a kind of part of the culture. Whereas here, we're a bit hands-off. We don't like touching people. You know, we don't like exposed skin, unless, of course, you go into the octagon on a Wednesday night.
It's super interesting, especially about the Sherpas, because they're incredible, aren't they? Like the way they carry so much up these treks that some people train their whole lives to do once. I bet they get all sorts of niggles.
Funny you should say that. So we went out to the Himalayas for about a month. We went to this place called Namche Bazaar, which is the Sherpa capital of the Himalayas. And it's on the way to Everest Base Camp. It's on the way to Everest. But we were there to teach the Sherpas to do sports massage for the trekkers. So the charity is called Lehara. It was set up by a physiotherapist called Lisa Jelly. What she wanted to do was give something back to the Sherpas. So she did Everest. She climbed Everest last May, I think it was. And one of the Sherpa guides was one of the guides that we taught to do sports massage. Now, basically, Sherpas don't get very much money at all. They get paid about $3,000 for that whole season. And that's to do all the stuff that they do, guiding and portering. They look like doors on their backs. It's ridiculous. And they're not wearing boots. They're wearing flip-flops. They've got a little stick to balance them and they're going along and they don't get injured. Us weak Westerners that go up to altitude and carry little bags, because all the porters are carrying their bags, are the ones that are getting injured. Yeah, because they're not used to it. Okay, so we went up there to teach them how to do the sports massage so they could increase their income. So normally they get about $2 a day. If they treated 5 trekkers a day, they get about $35 a day, which is
Wow.
a huge amount for them, and it's for their entire family. They're just another tribe, like the Cornish are, like the Welsh are, like the Scottish are. They're just another tribe from in Nepal. There's about 120 tribes in Nepal. So the Sherpas have got their own language. So we had a translator who helped us teach the Sherpas, help translate. A lot of them do speak English, but some of them didn't. And one of the ladies that was doing the course I think she was in her 30s, her husband had died that year on the Khumbu Icefall, portering stuff up. It was an honor to be able to teach them and to help them sort of improve their income, if you like. And that's why we did it. So we weren't treating the Sherpas at all. They were treating the trekkers.
It's
Yeah.
interesting you said you got an injury at one point in Treborth. That's what got you into things. I used to train at Treborth as well. I used to do like long distance stuff. Lockdown and all that hit. I got into powerlifting and then I tried to get back into running. And because I put on so
Yeah.
much weight from powerlifting, when I started running again, I started getting shin splints. What are some of the common injuries you tend to see in athletes at the moment?
Shin splints is a global term for a series of pain that you feel in your leg. And in anatomy, the leg is between the knee and the ankle. Yeah, I see that. Or medial tibial stress syndrome is one of them. Compartment syndrome in the leg is another one. It's interesting you say you went from running. So you were, what, a 1,500-meter runner?
Yeah,
And then you went into powerlifting. Is that right?
years after, but I thought I
Yeah.
could just get straight back into running again because I kind of knew I could do that. So I
And
went into
that
powerlifting, tried to get back into running, and it just, didn't go well.
that's a common thing that happens. You're kind of the classic, not you personally, but the general form of you is the classic person that I see, in that they've done some running in the past, changed their activity, either powerlifting, or they haven't done anything at all. They've gone out and they've gone to work, and then they come back to running and they love their running and they go, oh yeah, I can just do this now. Their body isn't ready for that. The forces that act, the ground reaction force, so the force that your foot, when it hits the ground, it comes back into your leg, is very different from walking around and around town, or even dancing for that matter. That continuous impact, yeah, particularly on the track. So track runners, particularly because of the spring in the track, your hammies get absolutely hammered. If you're not used to running on the track, I'm sure you're aware of this, your hamstrings get hammered because they can't absorb that springiness so much. It takes time for you to get back to that way of loading. But doing powerlifting really helps. And also the other side of that is the strength and conditioning, plyometrics. A lot of the people that I see, well, particularly runners, get injured, plantar fasciitis, Achilles tendinopathy, maybe knee problems, sometimes hip and back problems, and they get injured because they don't do what you do, Glenn, okay, as a trainer. They don't do any strength and conditioning. They think they can just go running, which probably when we were running around the savannah in loincloths, that's what we did every day. So you could just go running. But now we're sat down in, by the looks of it, a really nice comfy chair you got there. We sit down a lot. We sit in our cars. We sit on the toilet. In India or in Southeast Asia where I worked, they squat just to sit down. They don't sit, they squat on their haunches. A bit like the depth of a squat that we do when we're lifting. They don't get back pain, they don't get hip pain. Those are very different issues that I treated out in Singapore and in India than I treat here. I treat lots of knee injuries, ACLs, muscle pain, and we do that, or I do that, with a mixture of the stuff that I learned in osteopathy, but definitely with the sports massage. That's why there's so many great therapists up here in North Wales and around and about, because hands-on work can make you feel so much better. But what you do need to understand is the mechanism of injury, how they did it. You need to have some rough idea about how to diagnose. And also, if it's not getting better, you need to be able to refer on to somebody else who might have a better idea.
Interesting how the body adapts to the things you do. You give it enough time. I spent a bit of time living with a tribe in the Philippines. We'd go hiking right up these muddy trails, up through the jungle, up these mountains. I'd be thinking, damn, I didn't pack my hiking shoes. I've only got trainers. And they'd be going off with their feet just gripping the floor with their toes. I'd be thinking, how are they not getting heel pain, ankle pain from any of this? But it's just because they've done it so many times. Their farms are all on the top of these mountains and they have to go there every day. So their body's just adapted to it and they just, like you're saying, just don't get injured from it.
Absolutely, absolutely. And they're the calluses on the bottom of their feet I mean, that's often something that I look at, and that tells me about the pressure and where they're loading more of. But these tribes, certainly in, like you said, the Philippines where you were, which is fascinating, and I'd like to hear more about that, definitely. But also in India and in Singapore, for that matter, because they wear flip-flops all the time and walk barefoot, the thickness of their skin on the bottom of their feet is incredible. Whereas we will put our babies in these very cutesy little trainers straight away, even before they're walking. So it stops their feet moving, which is not the best thing in the world for us. Imagine having to keep a glove on for like a year and then taking it out. How do you think your muscles would be? They'd be wasted.
What are your thoughts on is it Vibro Barefoot, those shoes that advertise that they're supposed to feel very natural?
Here's a can of worms. The Vibrams, when they first came out, they were designed for yachts, for people to walk on sailing boats, not mark the floor, but also to be able to feel when they were walking because of the rocking and the yawing of the boat. Okay, they weren't designed for barefoot running or walking for that matter. I do think that just like conditioning, and you talked about adaptation, you need time to adaptate. Chris McDougall did the stuff about running barefoot. And even when he was talking about I think he was talking about South American tribes, the South American tribes would strap old pieces of hire to their foot because they didn't want to get hurt. I mean, it's a walking thing, isn't it? On sharp things. Again, if you walk up a ladder, try and walk up a ladder barefoot, or climb a ladder rather barefoot. It's extremely painful, and it's extremely painful because our feet have been put in shoes. If we start perhaps now, if you had a child now and didn't put them in shoes and let them run around all day long, and they would cut themselves and they run through dog poo and all that kind of stuff, they would probably adaptate over time and be fine. But for perhaps yourself, and definitely for me, who's nearly been on the planet for 60 years, walking barefoot or running barefoot up Snowdon, probably not the best idea in the world. I mean, you can do it. And people do say load slowly over 9 months, and then you can go into these 5-foot barefoot shoes. What I do like is the shoes that allow the spread of the toes in the front of the toe box. I think that's a good idea, but I'm not sure about the really thin soles.
Because we've got used to having cushioning, to take the cushioning away, it would just kind of limit your performance rather than actually contributing anything to your real long-term benefits.
I see a lot of people in clinic who are in pain, and some of them are in a lot of pain. It's very difficult for me to judge their pain, but some of them are in a lot of pain and some of them are in less pain. Some of them are so worked up, and the more worked up you are, the more pain you'll be in. So if you think about pregnancy, for example, when a lady's giving birth, they tell them to slow down. Yeah, they tell them to slow their breath down. Yeah, if you drop a weight on your foot, which I'm sure you've done in your career, initially you're like like that, aren't you? And then you go, okay, calm down, calm down. And the more you calm down, there is still that throbbing pain in your foot, but it's a lot less than it was when you were, all of a sudden. Some people can deal with that pain and calm down and run through that. But I think for other people, probably not the best idea. I mean, I can imagine athletes, when you're in your spikes, for example, there's very little cushioning, isn't there? There's a spikes, you're driving forward. If you land on your heel in a pair of spiked shoes, there's nothing there, is there, apart from a bit of plastic? But you're used to it. Whereas Mrs. Jones in the butchers, who does a weekly shop there, put her in a pair of Vibrams, I don't think she'd be very happy.
I think the first bit of work I saw of yours was when you made a video at End Zone. What are some things that athletes in the gym often neglect in your view?
They neglect programs. So when you go to a gym or you go out for a jog or I don't know, go climbing, that's exercise. Okay, you're burning calories and that's a great thing. Okay, you're not burning lots of calories, but you're burning calories. There's no other point to it other than burning calories. Are we talking about people who want to lose weight, or are we talking about people who want to get healthier, or
people who are into resistance training, like lifting weights, maybe people who push themselves to a level that, they see people pushing themselves to on social media, or that their coaches would push them to, but then they don't prioritize recovery enough.
Okay, well, as long as they're following a coached program, okay, and that's what I'm getting at there, rather than exercise, they're actually doing training. Okay, so if they want to lift as heavy a weight as, say, yourself, then they have to train for that purpose. The classic 3 sets of 10 is cobblers. That's like saying, I'm going to go for a jog and then at the end of the year, I'm going to go run a marathon. I mean, that's rubbish. Nothing's going to happen. You're going to hurt yourself. Resistance training wise, they often do too much. 4 days a week is enough. You need some recovery in there. And recovery for a lot of them means, oh, in that case, I'll go out and I'll run instead of doing the weights, or because they get themselves so psyched up and they're so focused on that journey of training. I think they forget why they're training. Why do you train, Glenn?
Yeah, I suppose I'm probably one of your worst case scenarios there. I just love training.
But you just said to me that how long did you spend with that tribe in the Philippines?
A month.
Could you have done that if you were overweight? Or would you have had such a good time out there if you were overweight or unhealthy?
Yeah, you've hit the nail on the head there. That probably is my motivation to train, actually. Longevity, being as strong and healthy as I can, getting the most out of every day sort of thing, and still feeling young even when I'm old.
Absolutely. So I'm turning 58 in a couple of months' time. I'm 18 stone. I'm about 4.5 stone overweight or over fat, let's say over fat. When I was younger, I did all the things that we shouldn't do. So I smoked, I went to raves, I took drugs, I overate. And I'm at this point now, I've got something called COPD, which is a respiratory disorder where you can't breathe very well. I've got a genetic disorder that I only found out about a few years ago that affects me a little bit, affects my sleep. I've got all kinds of things going on. And the reason I'm training now, like you, is I'm training because there's things that I can't do. So I went skiing at Christmas. I did one ski run, right? I'm too fat to ski. I'm too fat to ski. I did one ski run. My knees went, not having that. I can't afford being self-employed. I can't afford to injure myself. So I thought I'm not going to do that. So I spent the rest of the time in a pretty much in the sauna. We have to train, and this is what people need to do as well. I know we're going on a little tangent here, but we have to train to allow us to do the things that we want to do in life. Okay, if you are over fat, okay, we need fat. That's important for muscle contraction and all that kind of stuff. But if you're over fat and you can't fit in a plane seat, or you can't run for a bus, or you can't protect your family, or you can't, all of these things, then that's an issue. And there's a lot of that these days. Okay, we know that there's an obese epidemic. We're not allowed to say it. You don't have to say it, Glenn, because I don't care. People are fat. They're not big. They're not large. They're not their perfect weight and all that kind of stuff. I'm happy with myself. That's great, good. But if you're fat and you're over fat, you're affecting your health. Okay, and that's fine if you want to do that yourself. I haven't got a problem with that. But if it affects your health, then you're going to have to go to the doctors, and that's going to affect everybody else because they have to pay for that, and they have to get in line to wait for the doctors because you're dealing with your self-inflicted diabetes or your pain in your knees. People will say that. People often come to me and they go, "My doctor told me to lose weight because I've got knee joint problems," and I'm going, "Yes, that's correct. It's biomechanically. If you get yourself on an Olympic bar an extra £100 and walk around with that all day long, that's what they're feeling. Yeah. If they can take £50 off that, mechanically, that's going to affect their knees and improve it. But if you're carrying that bar around, it's affecting your heart, it's affecting your lungs, it's affecting your metabolism. You need to eat more.
What are your thoughts on the consistent rise in obesity in a time when we have the most information ever on how not to be obese?
As human beings, we take the path of least resistance, particularly in the Western world. Okay. So the Philippines that you were with, because they were probably used to, the Philippines is politically quite a harsh country. So they have to get on with stuff. They can't whinge about stuff. They have to get on with it. Whereas here, we can get away pretty much with anything. And although there is a lot of information out there, back here, these are all cookbooks. I like to cook a lot. Yeah. And there's all kinds of stuff. There's vegan, there's keto, there's all kinds of stuff. So I've tried it all, obviously. You can see I've tried it all. There isn't a one size fits all for everybody. I think one of the reasons it's a bit difficult for some people, the people that are interested in doing it, is because there is so much information out there and they don't know what to do. They don't know which way to go. And again, that's where a coach like yourself comes in, because you can guide them. I think anybody doing any exercise whatsoever is brilliant because every step is progress. But there are people out there, particularly now, the trend is physique. So every woman who goes to the gym now, not every woman, but a lot of women, are entering physique competitions, which I think is good. But because of that bulk shred cycle that they get into, that's not very good for the female body. It's not the best thing in the world for the male body, but it's certainly not, because the hormones, because of the balance of hormones in females is more important, particularly with reproductive issues and stuff like that. It can put them properly out of kilter. Quite a lot of long distance runners, female runners, they're amenorrheic, so that means they don't have periods, which increases the likelihood, which lowers their bone mineral density, which increases their likelihood for things like yourself that you get shin splints. It increases the likelihood for them to get shin splints, and then that, which is a precursor to stress fractures, and they get stress fractures. I've seen plenty of professional elite female runners, particularly mountain runners, with stress fractures in their tibs, in their pubic ramus, in their femurs even, because they have a very low level of body fat. They're not menstruating, and it decreases their bone mineral density. And that's really quite a difficult thing to deal with. On the flip side of people being overweight and fat, and women being overweight and fat, I'm not just picking out women, this isn't making a point for this, is if you're overweight and fat, you're loading your body more, which stimulates your bone growth. So it increases your bone mineral density. So if you are fat, one of the plus signs of that is that your bones will be much stronger.
Yeah, it's interesting when you say people who have been fat and then they go on a diet and lose a load of weight. Usually when they lose that weight, there's a bunch of muscle sitting there underneath and they get in some of the best shape of anyone that you see.
Now, that is a brilliant point, Glenn. A very common thing that I see as well. They come in and they've got back pain. And they say, well, I've lost loads of weight. I thought I wouldn't get back pain because I lost loads of weight, because the doctor said if you lose weight, there'll be less pain. But what it is your body. I'm going to draw a little thing here. Now, your body, let's say it's a little bit like this structure there, legs there. This is your spine here, and these are muscles, all right? Okay, now, when you're at a certain weight, these muscles are loaded for that certain weight. It's a bit like a suspension bridge. Think about a suspension bridge. Think about Menai's suspension bridge and all those struts going down it, right? So there's a certain weight that's dealing with, When they start losing that weight, so when we take off some things, those muscles are used to that extra tension, that extra weight, okay? But that weight's gone. So they are then loose. They're not loaded right. And that is the reason why people that lose weight actually get more pain, because those muscles need to be retrained to deal with that new lighter load, which is why people that are losing weight need to train. What I'm saying is people that just go on a diet and don't train will end up getting pain because their muscles are too floppy and aren't supporting them. I wish that I had my little tensegrity model here. There was a little thing about it on my YouTube and on my Instagram. But basically, tensegrity, should I say, it's this theory about how the muscles and the bones integrate together to form a stable but movement type body. So everything in our whole body is related to everything else. We talk about homeostasis and how we try and balance things up. So when you get up and you start walking, so when you're sat down, you're breathing at a certain rate because you're taking oxygen into your body to go to the muscles, and the muscles use that oxygen in order to create energy for when you're sat down. But the moment you stand up, your muscles need more oxygen as you move. So your breath rate goes up, your heart rate goes up, because you need to transport that oxygen to the muscles to allow you to move and to run. So when you're stood up, making a cup of tea, and you pick the cup of tea up, your calf muscles and your foot muscles are twitching away to stabilize you. The same as your shoulder muscles are, the same as your hand muscles are to pick that cup of tea up. They all work together, so they don't work in isolation. And this tensegrity model talks about how the tension between these bones keeps your whole skeleton upright. Otherwise, you just collapse to the ground if there wasn't this tension going on. And often what I see with people that are detrained, so people that have shoulder problems, for example, and they can't lie on their shoulder at night, it hurts them to sleep. And what's happening there is the deload, the lack of the tension in the muscles with the bones, it compresses. So when you lie down at night as a young fit man, your muscles are larger and have better tension. So you lie down on your shoulder, it's not a problem, it's comfortable. But as an older person who is detrained, or someone who doesn't train, they haven't got that tension. And as they lie down, the bones aren't kept apart by the tension in the muscles, and they rub on one another. That's why they get the pain there. That's why they get pain in their hips, like a trochanteric bursitis sometimes. Yeah. That's why when older people sit down, and when I'm talking about older people, I'm talking in their 80s and 90s, because they haven't used their glutes very much. They haven't got much tone in their glutes, and they sit down, they find it really uncomfortable to sit on hard chairs because there is no tension in the muscle there, no sort of padding, if you like. And that's what tensegrity is about. That kind of bridge analogy that I use, that's pretty much what tensegrity is about. If you take away a lot of weight, you need to train those muscles again to create that springy tensegrity deal. Otherwise, you've lost that all, and that's when you get the pain.
I've always had a theory that you can overstretch, as in, people who practice yoga or spend too much time stretching after their sessions, I always find they tend to be the ones who end up having joint issues because they're really, really good at stretching, but they don't kind of train with any resistance in those stretch positions. Whereas with resistance training, say you're doing a deficit deadlift, you're essentially touching your toes, which is a stretch, but you're doing it underweight. So your muscles are getting strong in supporting your joints in those extending positions. What are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. Okay, so back when I first started, when I studied sports science nearly 30 years ago now, everybody was onto stretching. Everybody was talking about that. You must stretch, you must do this. As we do, when we do research, for example, so research is continually going on. Okay. So back then, research was saying you must stretch and that will decrease your likelihood of injury. We should do another chat at some point about research methods and how they work. I taught that for a while, research methods and statistics. Research is brilliant, except that it's not static. Okay, it's changing all the time. 130 years ago, people didn't think you could fly. Now we're flying, we're going to the moon, all that kind of stuff. We've got jetpacks. So in 100 years' time, what we're talking about now, some of it might still be relevant, but a lot of it will probably be out the window. So you're absolutely right. I agree with you. So if you stretch too much, you destabilize the joints. Okay. The joints are held together with ligaments to stabilize them. And then the muscles go over the joints to move the joints. But they also work with the ligaments to stabilize the joint. For example, the ACL, the anterior cruciate ligament of the knee, which let's say this is the femur, and this is a tibia. This is your leg bone that takes you down to your foot, and this is the bone that takes you up to your hip. Okay, the ACL is a ligament that runs kind of through here and keeps these two bones together. And then over the top, you've got the muscles. Now, the hamstring at the back works with the ACL to stabilize it. All right. So often what I'll see is if people have damaged their ACL or they've ruptured it in the past, the hamstring, because it crosses here and attaches here, is overworking. So they come in, they go, I've got really tight hamstrings. Well, they haven't got really tight hamstrings. The hamstrings is compensating for the ligament that's lax here, that's making this joint lax. The hamstring's overworking. Now, this can happen if you overstretch. So if you overstretch your muscles, you can make those joints unstable and give yourself pain. All right. There's always a reason why muscles are tight. Sometimes it's because they are tight, they're fatigued. Sometimes it's because of a nutritional issue. Sometimes it's because they're overworked because the joint is unstable. Yeah. And sometimes they're just tight because you've overdone it a little bit. So yes, I agree with you. Physios in the past used to say, you got back pain, you've got tight hamstrings. Yeah. You've got to work on your hamstring. That's rubbish. That has changed over the time. Yeah, that's through research. But it's rubbish. It wasn't rubbish back then. Back then it was a thing. Back then they'd done studies. It's exactly the same with this core stability. Core stability came in with a chap called Stuart McGill. He did a study with back pain. Well, they found that their core, the transversus muscles, deep muscles, didn't work with these people that had lower back pain. So he hypothesized that if you had a better core stability, stronger core, that would offload the back pain. And then what people tend to do is they don't read the whole research paper, they read the conclusion, because reading a research paper is really dull. If you can't sleep at night, read a research paper. I mean, that'll do the trick. Unfortunately, you do need to read them, and also you need to be able to critique them. But they read them and they said, oh yeah, core stability. And everybody went on to pull the belly button in, pull the navel in towards the spine, squeeze your bum, really be tight and really brace and all that kind of stuff. One point on that, when you're powerlifting, you do need to brace. But you brace out, don't you? You don't pull the belly button in, you breathe out. That's the thing, isn't it? Brace, isn't that right?
Yeah, fill your stomach with air, essentially. Even though you can't do that, but thinking about doing that tends to work.
Yeah, Absolutely. So you're not pulling your belly button in, are you? You're pushing it out, essentially.
Yeah, bracing against your
But
spine, bracing against the belt. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. Against the belt, that's a cue, isn't it? For you to push against that. Yeah. Pilates and sort of yoga teach, not all of them, but a lot of them, they're still stuck in that old core stability idea that you pull everything in. Actually, what that causes, and again, research, and it's always changing, and it's not for everyone, by the way. So what I'm saying is that people can get the benefit from using that way of using core stability, but it's not for everybody. It's not a blanket thing. This is the thing that we tend to go off in the Western world, is everybody. So everybody must do exercise, yeah, or everybody must do this, or everybody must eat that, or everybody, it's not that. It's not black and white like that. It's a kind of a wavy boat that we've got going on, that some people can do this and some people can do that. Everybody's not going to be, for example, Usain Bolt. I mean, he's a funny looking guy. Yeah, those legs, funny looking guy. I remember watching Michael Johnson running the 200 meters and thinking, that's the funniest run I've ever seen. There used to be a guy up here in North Wales called Rob Samuel, and he still is, I think, and he won't mind me saying this, so I hope he doesn't. He was a brilliant 1500, 10K marathon. He won the Snowdon Marathon a few times. He was in the GB squad. His running, right? If you were to see him running down the road, you'd be going, how can he run so fast? He was like this. It was like a cartoon, right? He got injured and he came away for a long time. And I remember I was jogging around Llyn Padarn once around the track there, and I saw that normally you could see Rob from like a mile off. It was like he looked like a cartoon. He looked like a ragamuffin doll, and his legs were everywhere and his arms were everywhere. And there was this guy running like this. I thought, yeah, I don't know who that is. And he came past, and it was Rob. And he had further training, further coaching from someone to really minimize his swinging arms and legs. But core stability, like we're getting back to, you don't need to set that in place. So a really good person for you to have on, and I'm sure she'd love it as well, to have a chat to you, is somebody called Sarah Jane West Watson, and she's ex-physio come Pilates, specializing in women, and she runs a company called Fit Fanny Adams locally, quite a funny name. She is a specialist on core, if you like, or how to really properly activate it. Yeah, she does a lot of stuff online. She's got this brilliant idea she has, which I think we could all utilize. She uses these little dots, these little sort of sticker dots on her body, so you can see where her body's going when you're in a video, a bit like a biomechanical dot matrix that you get on bodies. I started doing some work with her because what I knew about core, what I thought I knew about core for the last 20 years is not so good now. And what she knows about it is a lot better. There is an issue called joint hypermobility syndrome, which is very, very common in athletes. Okay, and it's a genetic disorder. So if they've got it, their parents will have it and their brothers and sisters will have it. It affects all their muscles and connective tissue. And connective tissue is muscles, joints, ligaments, blood is connective tissue. The other muscles in the body it affects is smooth muscle, so the gut, digestion, so bloating. It affects the vascular system, so they get a little bit of a palpitation, a heartbeat, or it affects their eyesight, so they go blinder earlier. But a lot of athletes have it, like Michael Phelps, for example, is probably the most notable athlete that has it. So he's got something called Marfan's, which is along the spectrum of hypermobility. This is one of the areas that I'm looking at the moment. So I'm doing personally a strength and conditioning program at the moment with a company called Your Gym Sports Performance. In osteopathy and in physiotherapy and in chiropractic, we really don't get taught it on our courses. Okay, and S&C is foundational as far as I'm concerned. I really don't understand why we don't get taught it, because you can't rehab someone or prehab someone, stop them from getting injured without understanding the core benefits of strength and conditioning. You'll have done it when you were running, you'll have gone on the track and you'll have done pogo jumps for tendon compliance and stiffness. You'll have done A skips, B skips, wouldn't you, with your 1500? If you can remember that far back.
Yeah, we did all that kind of stuff.
That is to load your body for your running so you don't get injured. And you probably, I don't know, did you get injured much when you were running before you went to powerlifting?
I think I was too young to get injuries then. I probably did everything wrong and just looked it out because I was like 17, 18. Whereas now, if I tried to do the same stuff I was doing, I'd probably injure myself straight away.
You'd know better, wouldn't you? You know to set a plan up, to set a program, and then you'd follow that. Coming back to your point about stretching, it is useful to stretch, but it's not the be all and end all. You don't have to stretch so much. I'm going to say for you as an athlete, you don't have to stretch so much because strength is a big thing. For general Joe public who's just coming into the gym, yeah, and just starting, as we talked about earlier on, it's important to cover all those bases. So they're different ages, they've got different lifestyles, they've got different injuries that they've had in the past, they've got different underlying conditions. They might have heart problems, all kinds of different things, thyroid. On the other side of that, and the thing that I see a lot is they're wonky. We're all wonky. If you look at me, my shoulder on the left is much lower when I'm talking about this one here, is much lower than the right. Yeah. And my left leg is longer than my right leg. Okay. So that makes me really wonky. But we're wonky. That's how we are. A lot of people spend an awful lot of time trying to balance you up. I think if you're an athlete, if you're a lifter, that's probably a good idea. And doing unilateral stuff to strengthen things and particular movements is a good idea. But for people going in to see someone like me and saying, can you straighten me up? I think it's a waste of time. If they want that, we can do it. But once, 10 minutes as they walk out the door, they're going to be the way they were before, because that's how they are. We're not designed to be symmetrical, are we? I mean, look at it. Look, I've got two eyes, yes, but I've got one nose, got one mouth, got one heart. The lungs aren't symmetrical. The right lung's got 3 lobes. The left lung's got 2 lobes. We're not supposed to be symmetrical. Yeah.
My squat, I have to take a very wide stance because my ankle mobility is bad, right? I've tried things to improve it before, but I've got high arches. It's just like the shape of my foot. It kind of limits the amount my knees can come over my toes. So I take a wider squat stance to get the same depth as everyone else and get my reps in. That's something I'm going to have to work with, rather than being like, right, I'm not going to do squats anymore because I can't have my feet shoulder width and still get the same depth as someone who's hypermobile. I've just rolled with it and I've adapted my training to kind of suit that.
Absolutely spot on. Absolutely spot on. Listen, not everybody's built the same. High arches give you a very rigid midfoot, which is one of the reasons you get shin splints, to do with force distribution through the foot, through the cuboid. Basically, you distribute the force through your foot. It's supposed to sort of be a bit springy and collapse when you land on it. And then as you toe through, it becomes rigid, and it becomes rigid, so it becomes a lever to drive off to utilize the calf and the glutes. That's why you got shin splints, probably because of that rigid foot. But you're right, you can work around it, unless the only thing is, right, if you're going for like a talent inspection and they want you to be a powerlifter for Great Britain, and they look at you and they go, yeah, you can't get down. You probably wouldn't be doing that, but there would be other things that you would be more suited for. By the sound of it, if you're working with those Filipinos in the jungle there, you probably make quite a good mountain runner rather than a powerlifter if you've got that running background. We're not all built in the same way. You don't have to stop doing things just because you can't do it the way that Mo Farah does it or the way that Usain Bolt does it. If you enjoy it, then do it, work around it. And that's what we do with injuries, by the way. So if someone comes in with an injury, we don't want them to decondition too much. It depends what the injury is, but we don't want them to decondition too much. So we want to work around that thing. I had a conversation with a lifter the other day who was talking about behind the neck presses. Now, it's not brilliant for your shoulders, okay? Because the mechanics of your shoulders just don't like that. My shoulders hate it. I can't do it. That's why and also for lifting, I never use an Olympic bar. I always use a squat safety bar, just because my shoulders just don't go back that way. It's uncomfortable for me. He was saying, well, I want to get shoulder mobility. And I was saying, well, there are better ways of doing it, particularly if you've injured your shoulder in the past. So you can go behind the neck. That's fine. Even if you've injured your shoulder in the past, but it's a risk of re-injuring your shoulder or making it worse or getting a labral tear or something like that. Why would you risk something if you didn't have to? You're not doing it for a job. You're going there to train to be fitter and healthier so you can travel the world and spend a month with a Filipino tribe, aren't you? Rather than doing that ego type lifting that people do. And that's when they get injured,
God, who would do that?
Oh, I can't imagine.
I want to finish it up with this, right? What's one thing that you think people should start doing that would really benefit their lives in terms of longevity? If you had to say one thing.
Move every day. If you're going to Tesco's, park it at the other end of the Tesco's car park. When someone comes to the clinic, I'm there to get them moving again. That's it. You're the same. Movement.
Couldn't have put it better myself. Yeah, we're going to have to wrap it there. Zach, thanks so much for joining me today on Vantage Point. Yeah, I really appreciate your time.
Been a delight. Anytime.